In today's edition of Pros and Cons, and in the spirit of October, I decided to do one pro and one con for a chunk of the Resident Evil series. For this video, I'll be covering 1 through 7, no spin-offs or remakes. Sounds good? Let's start. What's up, scholars? Moira here, and welcome to Book of SHowtime Chapter 81. As always, if you enjoy these videos, be sure to leave a like and share with your friends, and if you have a topic you'd like for me to cover for Book of SHowtime, be sure to leave it in the comment section down below, or anywhere you can reach me on social media or the Book of SHowtime Discord. So I just want to say for the record, if I sound a little off, I do have a cold, but you know what? I feel good enough. My voice, my throat feels good enough. That sounds so terrible. My throat does feel good enough to do this video, so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to cut this video. There's so much I have to do in October, so bear with me, but let's just get into today's chapter and begin with the very first, the OG, Resident Evil. Pro, generational influence. While it wasn't the first survival horror game, it's absolutely the most defining and important one. The impact of Resident Evil sparked a massive trend in the horror genre, snowballing into countless horror games inspired by it on the PlayStation 2. While the story wasn't going to be Citizen Kane levels of good, the gameplay was gripping with fixed angles, tight inventory management, no HUD, and all types of creatures and traps to watch out for. There wasn't anything like Resident Evil on the market. It was truly one of one. There's still plenty of games today trying to emulate classic Resident Evil. Tormented Souls, Crow County, and Alyssa come to mind. Which, once again, why do white women run the horror genre? Is there a scientific reason for that? We should put Sandra Bullock in a horror game. She would be like prime Goran Dragic. I think maybe 2 people who watch this will appreciate that. Even George Romero gave Resident Evil its props, and he basically invented the modern zombie. I'm upset that Hollywood didn't mourn George Romero as much, but you know, he never got the respect he deserved, but that's for another video. Con, Chris's handicaps. Playing as Chris is just not fun, and it's weird that they made the characters have difficulties tied to them. When you play as Chris, you get 2 less slots, Barry doesn't help you out, you don't get the lockpick, the grenade launcher, you can't play the piano or mix the plant killer. Like, why would you play as Chris? You don't even start with a firearm. Now, I know some people may argue that Chris can fire faster and take more damage, but you know, if you're solid enough at the fundamentals, you probably prefer the extra slots and the grenade launcher over the extra health. Resident Evil 2. Pro, great sequel factor. Resident Evil 1 wasn't a flawed game, but Resident Evil 2 was still a massive improvement across the board with the cutscenes, the weapons, the combined stories, the improved narrative and location. This was the definition of more but better. Everything was just more refined in Resident Evil 2 and proof that you don't need to reinvent the wheel to make a good sequel. Con, nothing. Seriously, this may be a flawless game. I had to dig and try to find any type of criticism, and some people criticize the item box and the inventory properties, but that is an extreme reach. It's a video game, alright? You know, Resident Evil 2 really has no shortcomings that I can think of, so well done, Capcom. Resident Evil 3. Pro, the best replay value. Like its predecessor, Resident Evil 3 was a tremendous sequel off the board, and in a series that thrives on replay value, adding choices on how to tackle situations and an open-ended approach to some of the objectives, you can play Resident Evil 3 quite a few times and mix it up to keep the game fresh. This is a very unique mechanic that hasn't shown up again, even in the remake, and I think more Resident Evil games, more horror games in general should have things like this. Con, Jill isn't playable in Mercenaries. I know it's called Mercenaries, so it makes sense that only the mercenaries are playable, but still, this is Jill's game, not theirs, so not having her even as an unlockable, it just feels wrong. Resident Evil Code Veronica. Pro, very experimental. To me, Code Veronica feels like the real first Revelations game. The Revelations games do a lot of things different, and Code Veronica was no stranger to this philosophy. While the game still had fixed camera angles, the camera would pan with the players, which was probably to show off the new real-time backgrounds that replaced the pre-rendered ones. I also felt that the creepiness this game instills and the way it tries to immerse you in the situation was good, which is why I am salivating at a potential remake. Resident Evil was never a scary series, and I feel like they tried to be more scary as time has gone on, and Code Veronica today would be amazing. Con, pretentious difficulty. I always felt that Code Veronica was a game that if you really didn't cross your T's and dot your I's, you will get burned. And you'll get burned pretty hard because the game has a couple of points of no return. In addition to that, the way you navigate Rockfort Island is extremely tedious. I just hate that place. I played this game a handful of times, and I even played with cheats on a couple of my runs, and I still felt that the game wasn't fun. I always felt Code Veronica was overrated within the Resident Evil community, and the game being annoying with the difficulty was the main reason. I don't mind a tough game, but this game, I don't know, it just felt extremely pretentious. Resident Evil 0 Pro Billy Cohen. Just kidding, but Billy is one of the most awesome, coolest dudes in Resident Evil history. It's a shame we'll never see him again. Pro Unique Gameplay Loop. There's not a lot of nice things I can say about Resident Evil 0, but one thing that I can highlight, the fact that you can control two characters and use them to solve puzzles and navigate the environment in a unique way that we haven't seen to this point. The dynamic of playing as Billy and Rebecca seems like the precursor to what we would see in Resident Evil Revelations 2, and it's one of the lone positives that I can say about this divisive title. Con, no item box. There's a few flaws in Resident Evil 0, but I'm going with the biggest, which was the lack of an item box. There is no way that you can justify this, especially because there's a part in the game where you shift locations, which means you basically have to take everything one by one to the new, like, hub area, I guess. It just slows down the game extensively, especially in later areas. I know some people may try to say, well, Moira, you have two characters. I don't care if you had 3 characters. There's way too many items you have to keep track of for there to not be an item box, especially when some of the items and weapons take up 2 slots. It makes no sense. Resident Evil 4 Pro revitalized the series. No matter how good the Resident Evil games are, eventually they started to feel stale with the fixed angles and the controls. Eventually, Resident Evil 4 turned both the series and the genre on its head. Resident Evil 4 had an emphasis on action, and there were still your Resident Evil staples like inventory management and puzzles, but this was a shot of energy unlike anything we've ever seen, and the influence of the over-the-shoulder camera would be an inspiration to games like Gears of War and Dead Space. Con, Louis isn't playable in Mercenaries mode. This is one of the biggest crimes in the Resident Evil series. Louis has animations for shooting, reloading, getting grabbed, kicking, so why not throw him into Mercenaries? Obviously you're going to give him his Red 9 and maybe a shotgun and just let us run wild. The Red 9 is like such a fitting gun for him too. It's a cool gun for a cool dude. The fact that Hunk and Wesker get full unique animations and weapons when, first off, Hunk isn't even in the game. I know he's Resident Evil stable at this point, but geez, no Louis, it's heresy. It's heresy. Resident Evil 5 mainline co-op. We had a taste of co-op before with Outbreak and Umbrella Chronicles, but with Resident Evil 5, you had it on a grander scale. This was a fun co-op outing, and for a long time, it was like a rite of passage to being my friend. It was like, look, we either play Resident Evil 5 or I come up with a cool nickname for you. And soon it'll be the remake, so if you haven't played the original Resident Evil 5 with me, don't worry. The remake will eventually come in a few years, and that will be a new rite of passage for being my friend. Con, the series started losing its identity. Honestly, you can make this argument with Resident Evil 4 that the series started to lose its identity, but it really showed in 5. With the addition of co-op, I assume Capcom felt there wasn't a lot of room for puzzles and backtracking, and when you add co-op into any horror game, that takes away an extreme amount of tension and horror. If I knew someone was watching my back, I wouldn't be as scared. A fun game, but the core fundamentals started to escape and it would hit its apex in the next entry on the list. Resident Evil 6 Pro, great gameplay. This was a very fluid third-person shooter. It had great movement between the sliding, the strafing, the shooting while prone. It's really fun to get around. The melee system was great too, and it felt like you were playing a beat-em-up or a wrestling game at times, and you know, all this combined, it led to the game having the best Mercenaries mode. Funny mercenary story actually, so years ago my friends Amy and Zorky were telling me about how hard the No Mercy mode was for Mercenaries, and they described it, the way they described it, you know, they think they'd witnessed a rapture. And when I went and played it, it was tough, yes, but even solo, I was maybe 1 or 2 actions away from an S rank on this map called Mining the Depths. And they like to say, well, see, you didn't do it. You said it wasn't hard and all that noise. And yes, I didn't get an S rank. But the way they were describing the mode and map combination, you'd think you had no chance. They spoke of Mining the Depths No Mercy with the same cadence the women's of Salem spoke about witchcraft in the Crucible. I think it's just a skill issue, and they called me a bad gamer, and you know, I'm not gonna take crap from someone who helped fund Mighty Number 9. Like Zorky, if you go and play Mighty Number 9 right now, his name is in the backers. He can't unfund the game. That's it. It's set in stone. Con, the least Resident Evil game in the main series. While my stance on Resident Evil 6 has softened tremendously in recent years, that's mainly because I let go of the fact that outside of characters and enemies, this really isn't much of a Resident Evil. All the things that made the series great were abandoned, and while this game is still a blast to play, it's still a great game, it feels like you're playing a Lost Planet prequel than a Resident Evil sequel. Now, do we blame Resident Evil 4 for starting to trend in this direction with gameplay? Do we blame Resident Evil 5 for being one of the best-selling games in the series? Or do we blame Capcom for not just sticking to their guns? Wherever you want to point the finger, if you want to point the finger, one thing is true. Resident Evil 6 is a good game, but a poor Resident Evil. Finally, Resident Evil 7. Pro, tremendous reinventing of the series. You know, the early promotional stuff for Resident Evil felt like it was trying to be more like Outlast or Amnesia, but with combat, and boy, I was wrong. Resident Evil needed another facelift, and a new engine and protagonist did just that, as Resident Evil 7, not only was it one of the best Resident Evils of all time, it's up there in the all-time horror games debate, period, as you can see a lot of games following in the steps of Resident Evil 7. This was everything a Resident Evil always wanted to be and should be in 2017. Con, no bonus content. Every Resident Evil mainline game has come with a bonus mode of sorts outside of the original, so for 7 to launch without a Mercenaries mode or anything like that was pretty disappointing. And it became even worse when it was announced that the DLC would follow a week later. I feel like the banned footage could have easily been part of the base package, and it feels borderline scummy that Capcom made us shell out extra cash so soon to the game's release just to get some more Resident Evil 7. While they rectified this in Village, the fact still stands, this was a major blemish on an otherwise perfect game. Alright scholars, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below if you agree with my pros or my cons. Inshallah, I'll see you in the next chapter.